Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Streamed and Screened, an entertainment podcast about movies and TV from Lee Enterprises. I'm Terry Lipschutz, a senior producer at Lee and co-host of the program with the patriot of the cinema, Bruce Miller, editor of the Sioux City Journal and a longtime entertainment reporter. Bruce.
That is so good. Can I have that as on calling cards or anything?
Yep, get them printed up. Patriot of the cinema.
I think that's a good thing. You know, it's funny because during war years, patriotic movies do really well. Mm-hmm. People love that kind of stuff. And then in non-patriotic times, good luck. Good luck. World War II filled with them. Now we're fighting aliens. That seems to be the common enemy. But it is interesting how they will touch a vein here and there. We have one that has some ties to Iowa. Saving Private Ryan is based on a family, and I mean, it's not one for one. It is not a biography of that at all. But you can relate to it, and then you see, yeah, you know what? I can get this. I understand this. But there are a lot of, you'll see them now when you watch on TV, especially on those channels where they're trying to push this stuff. You are going to see a ton of them that they bring out. 1776, which is unwatchable, basically, comes out all the time this time of year because they think, oh, you're in the mood for a patriotic film. Let's look at those old Declaration of the Independence guys. And it's slow. It wasn't even a hit when it was out. So the idea that you would go back to that. But one that you probably have watched in recent years that is fun in this way is the live taping of Hamilton from Broadway. And that, I think, is a great patriotic film to watch because it really does point up that these are fallible men and women, that they can make mistakes, and we shouldn't look at them like they're statues or pictures on the back of money. Yeah, so I think Hamilton is a good one. If you're going to look for one this time of year to look at, go back to it because that's the gold standard for those kind of Broadway capture films. They did a beautiful job with that.
Yeah, and that was a really good introduction for me because obviously I knew about the performance, but I hadn't seen it to that point. So to see it on Disney Plus, and my kids, we watched it with the kids, and the kids loved it. They still play the soundtrack all the time, and we took them to see the touring version of Hamilton about a year ago.
You know, with the TV version, it has the subtitles that you can then read along with if you think the rapping is too fast. And I think sometimes when you see it in a theater, you miss some of the raps because either the sound isn't all that good or they're going too quickly. And at least when you go back to the Disney Plus version, you can read it if you need to. It's great for old people, which is basically my crowd. So there
Exactly.
you are.
Yep. So with the 4th of July holiday, we're going to go through here and just talk about some of our favorite patriotic films. And what else do you have?
All right. Top Gun 1 and Top Gun 2.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
That's a good double header.
I'm on my list, both of them. Those
really?
I don't even know which one I like better because Top Gun 2 is one of the rare instances where the sequel might be better than the original.
But you know what? You needed the one to understand the two.
Right.
Because you wouldn't Val Kilmer, how kind of vibrant he is in the first one, and then you see him near death in the second one. You kind of need to know both. So I don't know that Maverick stands alone, but I'd watch them together as a double feature.
Yeah, they're great. And I think what makes those films especially good is when you watch the original, they don't really say that, you know, it's the Russians or the Soviets or anything, but you know. And it's kind of the same thing with Maverick, where they don't tell you who it is, but you know. And it kind of makes it timeless, too, because you're not necessarily pinning it on any one nation. So it could be just whatever you watch it 30 years from now, and whoever the villain of the time is in world politics, you can just say, it's them. They're the ones that we're fighting.
Well, okay, so then we're in the mode of Tom Cruise. What about Born on the 4th of July?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a classic. Born on the Fourth of July was one of those two that Oliver Stone, because he had also done Platoon, so staying within that theme of the Vietnam War and just kind of different perspectives, of course. So absolutely fabulous movie.
Yeah, and hey, Tom Cruise does a great job. He's very good and very believable. We don't just see him as a gung ho kind of military man in this one. He's also an activist, and you can see other sides of things. The Vietnam War had so many sides to it, so many angles to it, that to call a movie the Vietnam movie is just impossible. And we'll still be dissecting that for years to come now, because it isn't just a one-shot thing. And I think that's where a lot of people get kind of, oh, wait a minute here now, aren't we patriotic? What's wrong with us? It's because during World War II, they were gung-ho on the American effort. And all of those films had to have some kind of, if you will, supportive statement that guided it. And deservedly so. When you look at the Vietnam War, people were questioning it all the time and wondering, should we really be there? And what's the point of all this? So it's a different war, a different kind of a situation, but I think it is a good one to look at.
What about a war movie, but a little bit more on the fictional side, like a Red Dawn from the 1980s?
Red Dawn is fun, yeah. And that skews to a younger audience too. Gives you a chance to see, and look at just even last year where we saw All Quiet on the Western Front, how really young we realized those kids were in that situation. And that's what Red Dawn does too, is it shows you that sometimes we're sending children off to war.
I remember that movie too, and I loved it at the time. It's been a while since I've seen it. I should go back and watch it. But at the time, it kind of scared me too, because it felt so real. Because, at the time, I never really thought the Russians or the Soviets would invade us, but it wasn't completely out of mind either. I mean, that's certainly within the realm of possibility. And I think that added some reality to it. And on top of it, it didn't necessarily have a happy ending. Like, some of our heroes from the movie didn't make it to the end, and these are kids, and it was it was a tough movie to watch at times.
Yeah, well,
a lot of adventure too.
Depending on where you are in your life, you see it in different ways. As an older person, you start looking, those are my kids. These are like, they could be my children.
Yep.
As a kid, you're like, that could be me. So it's a different perspective. Okay, what's on your list? Let's hear some more.
You mentioned Saving Private Ryan, which was on my list, but now I know we're talking mostly about films, but I do want to tie in here with Saving Private Ryan.
Band of Brothers?
Band of Brothers and The Pacific. Now, The Pacific I didn't find as good as Band of Brothers, but Band of Brothers is maybe one of the best limited series ever. I mean, is there anything better than that about World War II?
The people who were in it were nobodies at the time.
Yep.
And now you can just go through and go, oh my God, oh, look who's there. They're there. There's a bunch of them in it. And so if you go back for a second view, now it is long. It is, I said 10 parts, 12 parts. It's a lot. And we don't see that anymore because we're so used to 6 parts and out or 8 parts and out. But it's worth the sit. I think it's a good film. And Tom Hanks was involved.
And it was really good. Now, related to Tom Hanks, it is another arc that I'm going to throw at you, and it starts with The Right Stuff, which is, of course, a look at and then Apollo 13 starring Tom Hanks, and then, of course, Tom Hanks parlayed Apollo 13 into From the Earth to the Moon on HBO.
Sure.
That's that series. And then even more recently, even though it's completely fictional, For All Mankind on Apple TV Plus. I love those space movies. And for me, from a patriotic stance, it's the rivalry between us and the Soviets to get to the moon, to get into space. It's just a really great story.
Toss in Hidden Figures. And women played a part in this, and it was kind of like not a subplot to any of those. So there are lots. The space race was clearly the 60s story to tell. And I think when the Cold War was on, this was the way that we were fighting those battles. It'd be first, you know? We haven't mentioned a comedy at all.
A comedy.
Private
Private
Benjamin.
Benjamin. Sure.
Look at Private Benjamin. That's a really cool look at how a spoiled woman, for lack of a better term, is thrown into this situation and becomes much better as a result of it and comes out of it. And yet you can laugh along with her and you see her grow and you see that she's doing it in service to her country.
Along the lines of comedy, would you throw Stripes into that mix also?
You could, but I don't know that that would count as patriotic.
It's just more fun.
Yeah. If you want to do a military comedy, there you go. It might work a little bit better. Well, and then if you look at other ones, Clint Eastwood had a whole raft of patriotic-like films that he did. And he did the two-parter thing where he showed one side and then he showed the other side.
Flags of Our Fathers and the Letters from Iwo Jima.
Right. So he has his kind of, if you will, patriotic theme. It's like Spielberg has his.
Yep.
You can kind of trigger these. Oliver Stone, they almost find that as a way to at least identify their filmmaking skills or to highlight them. I don't know.
What about some of the historical
Lincoln.
films?
Lincoln.
Oh, yeah.
Lincoln is one of my all-time favorites because Daniel Day-Lewis always dug in and would become the character. And honestly, after you see that, you think, I can't imagine anybody else as Lincoln. And we've had so many Lincolns over the years. But man, his Lincoln is the way I want him to be.
Not to take this too far off topic, but is Daniel Day-Lewis the greatest actor ever? The man retired because he just couldn't do it anymore. The way he throws himself into it.
He may not be the greatest, but he was the most selective. And he knew that if he was going to choose to do something, he was going all in. And he didn't do, you don't see some crap films on his resume where you go, oh, that was a dog. He shouldn't have done that. He waited.
Yep.
And that's, I think, the real hard part for some of these actors today is they think, you have 3 and you're out. You can have 3 flops. And then if you don't have a good hit after that, you're down doing something that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And he never did that. And so I think the idea that he retired was maybe a great move. It's like Johnny Carson. He left and didn't do anything after that you would say, oh my God, look what happened to him. He looks so old, or he doesn't quite have it anymore.
Yeah,
but I think that Daniel Day-Lewis is one of the treasures of the American cinema. And come on, 3 Oscars?
Yeah.
Not that bad.
All right.
If you look at somebody like Jack Nicholson, Jack Nicholson has a very stellar career, but Jack Nicholson was playing Jack Nicholson a lot of those times. He didn't disappear in the character like Daniel Day-Lewis did.
Sure.
If that means anything. Okay, Patton. Okay,
Patton.
What do you remember most about Patton? I remember the big flag that he stands in front of.
Yeah.
Right?
It's been a while. Oh, yeah. The flag. That was what George C. Scott played Patton, correct? The personality. I think it was just more of the personality for me. I mean, it's been a really long time since I've seen Patton, but it was one of those that it would just keep on showing up on either cable. And I would just, every time it would come on, I would have to watch it because I was sucked in by the performance and how intense he was as a general.
Again, it's one of those things where you think, I want the character to be like that, because then it explains a lot of things. And maybe George C. Scott was just doing his version of it and Patton wasn't like that at all. But it certainly plays well, and it made the movie this huge hit. It was a big hit at the time it came out, and people weren't, look at that. It was like was it 1970? It's the Vietnam era, basically. And we're seeing a military film and we're saying, oh my God, it's so great. That really took something. That took some work to make that pass through all of that time and then let you see what it's like behind the scenes. So yes, Patton is a real good one. Great one.
Curtain calling all unexpected seekers. The time is here for this year's Capitol Fringe Festival, an annual celebration of theater and expression taking place July 12th to the 23rd in Georgetown. Whether you feel like belly laughing at lighthearted humor, grappling with life's toughest challenges, or toe tapping to the legends of bluegrass music, there's something for every audience member at this live, uncensored event. Come laugh, cry, and make a scene with us. For more information or to book your tickets, visit georgetowndc.com/fringe today.
There's a lot of patriotism in sports too. Miracle.
Yeah, do you count that as one? I
Yes.
mean, yeah, I get the Olympic kind of thing, but
I think with Miracle, because you're talking about the 1980 Olympics, which was, of course, around the time of the boycotts, because the U.S. boycotted the Summer Games, and then ultimately the Eastern Bloc boycotted the '84 Summer Games in L.A. You look, that was a time before professional athletes, before like Western professional athletes went to the Olympics. It was about amateurism, and it was this one opportunity where a bunch of amateurs in a sport that the U.S. doesn't even dominate in. I mean, we've got a lot of great American hockey players, but they don't stand up with the Canadians or the Europeans or the Soviets or anything like that. So to be able to go out on your home ice and to be able to beat the Soviets during the height of communism and all of that, I think that's a highly patriotic movie.
you know, though, isn't it funny how they've tried so many times to use that kind of formula in another setting, you know, and bring it around, and it doesn't work as well as that. You mentioned Olympic films, and Bud Greenspan would do an Olympic film every time there was an Olympic year. 16 Days of Glory. I mean, you throw them out there, and those are always, and it was a tough day for so-and-so. And, you know, and you do get that kind of moment where you think, oh my God, this is bigger than what we think it is. It's not just somebody out there running as fast as he can. There's more on the line. Now, TV has borrowed that concept and does these little kind of vignettes. It drives me crazy when they do it with American Idol, where everybody is supposed to have a story, and we're judging you on your story, not necessarily on your talent. But they've done that now. That was kind of what drove all of his documentaries, is that it was the story you didn't know about this. You know, it could be a runner who's hobbled, but nobody's going to say anything because they don't want to spoil the day. And he gets out there on the day and he's running like a lightning bolt, and he wins. And then they tell you all the trouble that goes into that. Those are fascinating films to watch because you really don't know what's going on until they spell it out for you. And he had a very successful run of those kinds of films. And largely there were a lot of Americans that were featured because it's financed by American resources. So
Interesting.
Yeah, Olympics are always good for that kind of stir of patriotism that we feel. And come on, don't you cheer for the Americans when you see the Olympics on?
Of course.
Yeah, I'm the kind who will yell out fall when it's not an American. So, you know,
what else do you have on your list? Any others?
Glory with
Mm-hmm.
with Denzel. I thought that was great. I have Gettysburg. I have National Treasure.
Yes, that's on my list too.
That's an interesting one because come on, it's a mystery kind of, Da Vinci Code-ish kind of thing. But the idea that you get to visit some of those spots are what make it kind of fun to see.
I really enjoyed those as a history buff too, and my kids like them, and I've kind of used that as a gateway to introduce them to Indiana Jones also, which I don't think is quite as patriotic as National Treasure, but it's the same idea of like an archaeologist kind of person who's into relics. So it's just as a gateway into Indy for my kids. The National Treasure series I think is good, and it's pretty low key. It's pretty kid friendly.
One I do not like. Are you up for that?
Sure.
The Patriot.
Okay.
with Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
I think it's real heavy-handed, and I think, I don't need this, please. And
Yeah. I
if I
didn't. I
could
skipped
spell it
over
out
that
for
one.
you, yeah, I'd have to go back to my review, because at the time I remember going, boy, are they ever trying to manipulate us? And frankly, that's what all political ads are now, is a manipulation. So
Mhm.
whenever you see any of these ones, who's got the bigger flag? That's what they're looking for. Who can sound like the bigger patriot? And you know what? Patriotism is not something that you can put on. It's something that's in you. Does that make sense?
It does.
Do I sound like I'm reading from Bartlett's Familiar Quotations or something? But
Deep thoughts with Bruce
no, but it
Miller.
is one of those things. I see that so much with politicians, where they try to out patriot
Hmm.
each other, and like, I am behind America more than you are, and I will salute more than you will. And no, and you know what? I remember the VFW and the American Legion men who would walk in a parade on the 4th of July, and they would salute, and you felt every bit of their pride and the effort that they put into their country. And I don't know that that's at all what politicians are selling. Do I sound? I'm, and this sponsored by the Patriots for Miller campaign.
That's right.
But
That's
no,
right.
because it is really different. And I think we have not yet seen that great 4th of July movie, a 4th of July movie where maybe it's a small town, that they're putting together a small town celebration, and you get a sense of what it means to be that kind of America, and how it shuffles down. I mean, look at now. I said earlier, it's aliens we're fighting. And you'll see the Independence Day, and you'll see all those kinds of, high special effects kind of films. Where is that really it? I don't think that's it. I
Yeah.
don't think it's.
I had Independence Day on my list for no other reason than it was, I don't know if it was a patriotic as much as just we're trying to save the world, and it's titled Independence Day. So it's one that they just kind of bring out for Independence Day.
It's interesting, and we'll see a lot of it. It'll be run like crazy over the 4th of July holiday, especially since now the 4th of July falls close to the middle of the week.
Right.
We'll have a whole weekend full of these. They're going to be showing them wall to wall from Friday until Tuesday. So we'll see what happens. But,
we talked a little bit about, World War II movies, Vietnam movies. We're starting to see in the last decade or so movies with our more modern kind of wars post 9/11, films like The Hurt Locker, Zero Dark 30, American Sniper. Any thoughts on those?
they're hard to watch because they are so real for us, because we experienced a lot of it on the news.
Yeah.
We would see these kinds of things, and the whole bit with Taliban and all that. Are we through it? I don't know. And all of the 9/11 films that come about, I think a lot of that is very difficult for those of us who've lived through it to really sit and see it as something other than. And one I'd like to push out there, if you really want to look at a sense of history, Ken Burns does such incredible documentaries about just every aspect of American life. And the ones that, he just did one about the Holocaust this last year, the U.S. and the Holocaust. And he's done the Civil War, he's done baseball, he's done Nashville, he's done you name it. And he touches on various aspects of our lives. And I think inherent in all of that is a sense of patriotism.
Yeah.
He is a real proponent of, who we are and what we've learned and where does this lead us? What will we get from this? And that old line about how don't ignore history because you're doomed to repeat it. I think he's reminding us, pay attention to your history, learn what happened so that then you don't make the mistakes again.
I really wasn't thinking too closely about those Ken Burns documentaries because I was more in movie mode. But when you bring that up, the Civil War, baseball, the one about country music, even though there are three separate subjects, they are very much intertwined in a sense, because it is about, you're right, patriotism, the fabric, baseball as being like the fabric of America, and one of those things. So yeah, no, I love all of those. You drop me in front of a Ken Burns 10-part documentary and I'll see you in a week.
And then you're waiting. Well, wait a minute, I got to hear that voice, because there's certain voices that always have to be in on these. Wait a minute, does he have them? And it's a very predictable kind of format, but he always has interesting tidbits that you never knew. When he did Ben Franklin, the Roosevelts, I mean, things that you go, really? I didn't know that. How come I haven't known this all these years? And I think it's a matter of just digging in and finding this stuff and putting it in perspective. What does this mean for the world at that time? Baseball is a real good one with that, where he talks all about the players and what their place was and how important they were to, maintaining morale in our country. Black baseball players and what their struggle was like. There's a lot there to unpack. But I think Ken Burns, if we're going to look for somebody who can really capture our times and our people, and he doesn't like to do anything that's that current. So you ask him, like, well, what would you do about Trump? What kind of a Trump document? He said it's too close. We can't. Yeah, we need to have perspective to be able to look back on these things and then see what we learned from that.
It's fascinating. Maybe that's why some of these newer war movies, there's been fewer of them to begin with, but we haven't gotten enough time in between. And we are seeing even now like a return to, World War I and some of those earlier ones, which we had kind of moved away from those early war, but we're kind of moving back almost to those just a little bit. One fascinating thing too that you bring up with Ken Burns and those documentaries, if you remember in the baseball documentary, one of the guests, one of the figures talking about the history of the game was somebody that was, I think he was always wearing a red sweater. I don't know if you remember that guy. He kind of became known as like that red sweater guy in baseball. His name is Daniel O'Krent, right? He's an editor. I think they listed him in as he's an editor. He actually invented fantasy baseball.
Oh my God.
He's the guy, him and some friends of his created this thing called, like, they had a rotisserie league baseball thing. That was the genesis to all of modern sports. So if you, like, even if you're getting into some NFL fantasy football thing, during the football season, it can all get traced back to that guy that was on Ken Burns baseball.
Did he make a dime off it?
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. No.
Some of those best ideas get you nowhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. Any other films you want to touch on before we head out?
There are, a number of them. Just Google patriotic films. Like I say, the World War II ones are fascinating because you'll find a story about a wife who's at home and what she has to deal with and the struggles and the pressures. And that is very fascinating to see how they played that out. Or somebody going off to war, even something as simple as White Christmas. If you go back and look at White Christmas, where they're going to help this fellow soldier, their commanding officer, give him a better life. And you see that tie that something like the military does bring, where you go, White Christmas, patriotic, and it is a patriotic film. So look at that kind of period and look at those kinds of things they did. Even though they're singing and dancing, it could be a patriotic film.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we'll sign off.
Salute.
Yep. Salute you all. Enjoy the 4th of July holiday. Throw some burgers and dogs on the grill. Grab a cold one.
Fireworks. I love fireworks. It's the best thing ever. And they're not American.
I know. And a little trivia for you, Bruce. It will be my 15th wedding anniversary on July 4th. My wife and I got married
on the 4th of July?
We got married on the 4th of July. So 15 years this year.
Yep, so how do you celebrate?
We usually go see fireworks.
Okay.
So we do that. But yeah, no, we got married. We had our ceremony. We had a reception. And then we drove out and watched fireworks. I was still in my tux. My wife was still in her wedding dress. Little girl comes up to her. did you get married today? And it was fun. It was
Oh, how? But you can never forget it. So maybe that was that her choice? She said, "Let's get married on the 4th of July."
It was my choice, so I could never forget. Yep.
So it was okay. Well, you can always say these fireworks are just for you.
That's right. Exactly.
Well, happy anniversary and have a great 4th of July. We'll be back next week, and we'll be talking to the cast of What We Do in the Shadows. If you're a fan of the Vampire Show on FX, we've got scoops for you about the next season, and you are going to be surprised at what's coming.
Michael J. for Hope for the Warriors. Started back in 2006 at Camp Lejeune. Military families witnessing the effects of war on their loved ones. Now, almost 20 years later, they've aided over 53,000 service members, veterans, and families with confidential, high-quality behavioral health care services at little or no cost to post 9/11 vets and their families. Over 91% of every dollar donated goes directly to the programs. If you're as concerned about our heroes as I am, go to hopeforthewarriors.org.